This is We the Sales Engineers Podcast, show 96.
Welcome to We the SE's podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramsey Majaba.
What's up, Benny?
Hey, not too much. How are you?
Well, not much at all, actually. Just the kids are going to sleep upstairs. I can hear fighting and lots of banging on the floor. So it's going well.
That's how they get tired, right?
I hope they get tired before we get to put them to bed.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't work.
Never.
Ah, man. I can't wait for you to have kids.
Yeah.
Just so I can sit back and laugh.
It's true, actually. I'm probably going to go through the same pains and complain a lot.
Yeah, well, that's what the grandparents do now. They just they rile them up and they walk away. It's like, you did this to us. Now we're doing it to your kid. We're helping your kids do it to you. So
I'd like to imagine at that point, we could just put those, like, it'll be acceptable to put kids in one of those big, like, plastic bubble balls and have them run into each other and not damage anything until they get tired and then they pass out.
They'll find a way.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah. All right. Kids aside, well, it's an interesting dynamic. Having a full-time job with kids, almost everybody has it. It's not that interesting, but like being a sales engineer, I really think it helps me with the kids. Not in terms of anything skills-wise, just because it's so flexible. Like, it just allows us to be around I can work from home a little bit more and, see them. Just like when my oldest comes back from school, I can go up and say hi. So it's just an interesting, I find sales engineer very good for parents.
Yeah. No,
That's
I would
free
agree.
commercial for sales engineering.
Right. No, I totally agree. As not a parent, I mean, I would say that the flexibility, you know your schedule, you own your schedule. And so, yeah, it's kind of cool for you to be able to do what you want when you want, given you're able to fit it in with your work.
To an extent, right? You own your schedule to an extent.
Of course. Yes,
you're
yes.
working with, so yeah, that's kind of what we talked about today. Well, not exactly, but we work with account managers, 1, 2, or more, who kind of own our schedule just as much as we do. We can push back, but at some point, like, we have a job to do, right? If we're not doing demos, then we're not doing our job, or if we're not doing discovery calls, whatever it is. This has nothing to do with our topic of discussion for today, though. So let's get in there. Today's guest is Bryan Young. He's a sales engineer at Cisco Systems. In case you don't know about Cisco Systems, you should. It's one of the biggest companies out there. They're also one of my customers, so that worked out. Yeah, and we're going to talk about, you were driving, by the way. If anybody watches this on YouTube, we don't generally have traffic in Ottawa, but it snowed a little bit and people don't know how to drive in snow for some reason, including Benny, because he was on the road for around an hour and 20 and he was waving to a lot of people.
No, it's because, man, I would say that I'm probably one of the best drivers out there. I find it's such a pet peeve of mine when you let somebody go in front of you, because of traffic, whatever it may be, if they don't wave, it irks me. So I try to not be the person that I hate. And I always try to wave to those that let me in to merge into a lane or whatever it may be.
So, a lot of people let you in, man. Like,
well, yeah,
you're
that's the
waving
highway,
constantly to the point where Bryan had to stop and ask you who you're waving to.
It's true. Well, it's good luck traffic from the right lane to the left, man. You gotta wave a lot.
All right. So he's an SE at Cisco. Oh my God, this is going horribly. He's an SE at Cisco. We talked about a lot of topics, but mainly around being an SE at Cisco and the benefits of it and the challenges of it. So I think we can end the intro here and jump into the show. Good morning, Bryan.
Good morning. How you doing?
I am doing well. Thank you for coming on the show. And you spell Bryan differently than I've normally seen.
I spell it the cool way, Bryan, yes.
That's right. I'm pretty sure every other Bryan would disagree, but I like it. So now that we know your name, can you introduce yourself to the folks listening?
Absolutely. So again, my name is Bryan Young. I'm a systems engineer with Cisco Systems. I've been in this role now for about 3.5 years. As there's a lot of different roles within the engineering department at Cisco within the sales side of the house. I'm what they call a Generalist SE, or now they call us an account SE. So what that means basically is that I cover everything under the Cisco umbrella, including Cisco umbrella, which I'm rocking my Run DNS shirt today. Got to give props to those guys. So cover everything there. And the idea is to go an inch deep and a mile wide. So one of the first things I learned at Cisco was the fact that we actually have more SKUs than Walmart, which when you learn that in your first week is kind of a, what the hell did I just do moment, right?
Yeah.
So, but there's definitely a lot of support there, which we'll go into, I'm sure, as we discuss this topic throughout this episode here. But there's a lot of support mechanisms in place, and there's a ton of knowledge and information out there at your fingertips within the Cisco community that just makes the job easier. Even though it sounds like, especially on the surface, to know a little bit about everything, like a daunting task, but it's not that bad.
So I've worked for Alcatel-Lucent before moving on, and whenever I wanted to learn about some specific protocol, like let's say EVPN or whatever, and I do a search, I would never find the Alcatel-Lucent response. I always find the Cisco response. So I always ended up learning from Cisco websites. So speaking of documentation and support, at least at a superficial level for those who aren't even SEs, there's a lot of support out there. And you just mentioned like generalist versus like account and generalist, SEs, inch deep, mile wide. How does it make you feel knowing that you know a little bit about a product versus a customer who might know a little bit more? Like how does it work for you?
That's a great question, actually. So what I like, and I did listen to your episode about the things not to say, so I'm sorry I said that. But no, it's a good thought, because I do, especially in the beginning, right? It took me about a year to get ramped up into into feeling comfortable in front of customers and being able to present on a topic. But one of the things that I've learned, and I actually heard this in my interview on my own podcast with our senior vice president for engineers globally, he told me that he had gotten some advice early in his career that you basically only need to be 15 minutes ahead of the other guy, right? So, again, there's a ton of topics that you can learn about with Cisco, but there's also a ton of resources. So if you know you're going to go into a meeting, you're going to talk about, let's say, Cisco umbrella, and it's not something that you're really, you're just not comfortable with yet. There's a couple different avenues you can choose. So specifically within Cisco, obviously doing your research is one, right? Wanting to learn it is definitely a great first thing to do, but you may not have the time. So option two is to bring in a support team. So and within there's tons of different branches. We have our virtual support team out of North Carolina that can pretty much demo or discuss just about any topic. They're great group of guys down there, and they really come in a pinch. But we also have specialist SEs. As I mentioned, my role is as a generalist or an account SE. We do have, let's say, an SE or an account manager that just handles security products, or one that handles collaboration or something along those lines. I can bring them in. And what I've found extremely helpful when I bring in any of those resources, I still go to the meeting. So because I'm the account SE, I am tied to that account through that account manager, right? The way my patch works is we only have named accounts. So it's changed a couple times over the years, but the way it's set up is I am attached to two SEs. Each of them have 25 named accounts. So I'm going to be that single source of truth from Cisco with that account, with the contacts at that account. So I want to make sure that I build that trust relationship. So if I don't know the topic, I'll bring in a specialist, join the meeting, and learn it. If I do it once or twice, maybe 3 times, if it's a really tough topic, I'll be able to kind of work through it and learn as I'm watching someone else do it. And that's really how it helps you get ramped up within a new position at Cisco, being an SE.
So you mentioned you're tied to 2 SEs or 2 salespeople.
Sorry, I might have missed. I'm actually attached to 2 account managers.
Account managers. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Benny, you had a question?
Yeah, that's actually the exact same question. And then to that point, I suppose, so is that kind of the general structure, I suppose, of how things are done over at Cisco? This idea of every account, obviously, the salesperson, but then also there's maybe a technical generalist, and then the two of you in tandem kind of bring in any subject matter experts to help further the deal or help push the needle. Is that kind of how it works, more or less?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple different facets of the sales department within Cisco. So I'm in commercial. So I don't deal with government contracts. I don't deal with schools or there's enterprise accounts, which are like the really, really big companies out there. They're way too big for me. And we used to be commercial mid-market. Now we're more of what we call commercial select. So we have um, it's a weird way that they've changed it this year as far as how they identify customers that fit into this narrow band. But for those teams that are in that band, yes, and for under commercial, yes, for the most part, you have an account manager, and maybe there's an SE that's tied one-to-one with him. On our team, we actually have one more account manager than we do SEs. So my colleague Brian and I are the two SEs down in our little part of the region, and then we have actually three account managers. So one of them gets split between the two of us, and then we each have, basically are tied directly to the other two. But the nice thing about in my position specifically, in my situation, is that my colleague is really good on data center, which is not necessarily my forte. And then I'm able to talk about security, which is not something that he really does. So we can still kind of go back and forth, but ultimately, if it's one of Sean's one of my account managers, if it's his account, he'll probably bring it to me, and that customer will get to know me, and I'll have that relationship and be that trusted advisor.
So you own the account with your account managers. Who makes the decision to bring in external resource, whether it's the specialist or the virtual support team? Is it you or the account manager?
It's usually a conversation that's had between myself and the account manager. If it's something that, the account manager come to me and say, hey, we're going to talk about this topic. Is that something you feel comfortable with? And if I do, I'll be like, yes, I can, or maybe I can do it, but I don't have the cycles available in my schedule, because when you support two account managers, you get double booked. I got about 3 meetings happening right now, but I chose this one.
Thank you.
No problem. But yeah, it's usually a conversation between the two of us, and to figure out, okay, which way do we want to go? Do we want to involve our virtual systems engineer team? There's a process to do that. Do we want to bring in another generalist SE that we just know is better at this? So I have a colleague up in our Rochester office that is really, really good with collab. Like, he's been doing this since Cisco pretty much, bought, what was it, Celsius, I think they bought for the IP phones. So he's been doing this forever. And if it's a collab thing and it's not something I feel comfortable with, I'll bring in him. Or we can go to the specialist, which would kind of be a kind of an up and over kind of thing on the org chart, right? So it's really a joint decision, but it's definitely guided by the engineer based on their comfort and their availability.
So how do you manage that? Like, I have these specialists as well, and I send them a question, and it takes a few days to get an answer. And when I first started, I would just say, well, I already asked them the question, I'll just wait for the answer. And now my mentality has changed to, no, I need to get the answer. Let's follow up again. How do you manage working with a specialist who you might be a small portion of the people they support?
Right. No, that's a tough one, because there are many times where being a company as large as Cisco is helpful, but this is definitely an example of a time when being a large company can be frustrating. There have been numerous times where I may not have access to the tool or know the workflow or whatever of a particular step to fix a customer issue, for example. And that may be holding up a sale. So I deal in pre-sales only. I'm not supposed to touch post-sale stuff. So when I've got a customer that is having an issue with a server, and over here I've got a $3 million collab deal on the table, I'm the one that's frantically trying to figure out, who do I have to talk, who do I have to call, who do I have to get a hold of? Because as you said, it's a huge piece for me, but for someone else, it's a small piece. Yeah. I don't think there's a real answer for that. It's definitely on a case by case basis. It's something that we bubble up to our managers, who bubble up to theirs, as to figure out ways to make it easier, and to make sure that we don't drop the ball. But of course, I think that's what happens numerous times. And if it is something, I fall on the sword. It's like, hey, listen, this was my bad. I couldn't get a hold of people I needed to. I tried going to other avenues. We've figured this out so that with me, you and me, this won't happen again. But I don't think there's a straight answer for that. I apologize. It's something that we have to deal with, and unfortunately, it's the double-edged sword of being a large company like Cisco.
Yeah, I love that you said like you'll fall on your sword. Nobody wants anybody to fall on their sword, right? Nobody wants to fail, but that you're talking about extreme ownership. Basically, you're owning the problem. And so I was listening to a podcast called Jocko Podcast, which I talk about a lot, and he was reading a letter from General Patton, and he said that like asking someone to do something is only 10% of the battle. And then following up with them, making sure that they do it, that's still part of your responsibility. And as SEs, at least that's a struggle that I had initially, where I send someone a question like support, hey, I opened a ticket for this customer, please help him. And I wash my hands of it because I did my job.
Right.
But turns out, no, that's not my job. My job is to make sure that they supported them, because there is a bigger deal in the process as well. They don't care. Support doesn't care because they're not involved in that.
Right.
So I basically agree with pretty much what you said.
Yeah, and we do have a team, and they've changed their acronym a few times, so I forget their title now, unfortunately. But they're also out of RTP, but they are awesome at helping me stay on top of that. So that's actually something that they've done. Where if let's say there's always a post sales issue that comes up with my line of work. Let's say there is a TAC case, a customer that's experiencing an issue. They've opened up a TAC case, and they want me to help, and it's like, I don't have the resources. I'm not the right person for the job. I can't even legally tell you what to do. It's just not something that I can do. So what I end up doing in that case, if it's something that I need to keep high visibility on, is I will engage this team, and what they do is make sure that TAC doesn't drop the ball, and they keep me up to date. And they it's like daily emails, like, hey, this is what happened. This is what happened. They kind of summarize it for me.
Yeah.
And it's really helpful because I remember I had one instance with a customer. We had, I think it's referred to as a triple R. Basically, the TAC case was, it was a severity 1. It had been open for so long that basically it was in Chuck Robbins' inbox as far as, cases that are causing us issue. So this had a lot of visibility in Cisco, and of course the customer was not happy. And they called me, and I had just gotten on the road, and I had a 5-hour drive to Rochester. And I'm like, I can't do anything. I have to drive. I have to be in Rochester by a certain time. I can't pull over and take out my laptop and fix this. What do I do? And when I engaged that team, I said, listen, I'm on the road. You have to call me with updates. You cannot email me. Please call me. And they did. And it was great. So in that occasion, we have those teams in place. Is it perfect? No. But we definitely try to cut out the corners where we can, right?
Okay. And for those who are not in networking, you mentioned the name Chuck Robinson.
Chuck Robbins is the CEO of Cisco.
CEO of Cisco. So an issue got escalated all the way to the CEO. How do you not abuse that team? Like, make sure that not all cases need to be escalated to that point. How do you make the decision? I know it's case by case basis, but in general.
Yeah, it's really case by case. And again, it boils down to my availability, right? If I know it's something that needs to be watched like a hawk and there's not enough resources on it, then maybe I engage that team. I actually just got a little alert on my screen about an issue that is going on with a customer where they had equipment down, right? I'm on the thread, but I'm not saying anything because the other people that are in it are way more qualified to discuss it than me. I keep an eye on it. I make sure that they're going with it because, of course, we've got a deal that in motion that we've got to pump the brakes a little bit for. But as you said, it's really a deal by deal basis. It's case by case, and we just got to figure out, does this warrant bringing in this team? I got to ask, who's he waving to? He's waving to so many people.
Sorry, third time I've with somebody with heavy traffic right now.
I'm just picturing you on the highway, and I'm like, man, how many people on the side of the road does he know?
So in case anyone's wondering, Benny's stuck in traffic. He's been driving for over like an hour and 20 minutes right now, and he's still not on the highway. I don't know if you are on the highway.
On the highway now.
He's on the highway now. So another hour, he'll be close to being at work. And he just keeps waving at people who let them.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
pass.
interrupt, but I was just like, his wave is like so friendly. It's like, hey, I know you. Like, I'm like,
Benny
is he
such a
driving
friendly
around in
guy.
circles? Is he just? I'm like, there's just no way. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really as you got to hear about it to be. Everybody knows each other. It's not somebody else.
Yeah.
Now that I just completely derailed the conversation.
No.
I'm sorry. What was the question?
Well, you actually answered it, but I do want to point out, like, we're both in networking.
Yeah.
And your job does not allow you to touch anything with post sales. You have to be informed. You have to be able to push to make sure everything is fine. I am also in networking. I'm in test and measurement. My job is to be there. Like, I have actually literally have to go and reboot chassis or hook up chassis, make sure that everything's going well. So, like, even in the same industry, sort of, we do two different things.
Right.
So just we talked about that, Benny and I. We talk about the diversity of sales engineering roles. Like, even we have three SEs here, and our roles are kind of similar, but also very different at the same time.
Yeah, and I see it within Cisco too. It's been really eye opening, as I mentioned, without sounding like I'm promoting it too much. I've been doing my own podcast, which I think we're supposed to be talking about later too.
Yes, we are.
What the feedback that I've gotten from that, just from the internal Cisco teams, right? They come back to me like, oh, that's not a topic that I know about because I focus on this area. And, you know, that episode was extremely enlightening to me. It really helped me with that topic or with that customer conversation. And I'm like, you know, it's something you don't think about. It's like, wow, I stay in my lanes, right? And my lanes are kind of wide, right? As I mentioned, I go an inch deep and a mile wide. So as a generalist, I'm kind of expected to know a little bit about everything. Which I like, because if and when the company pivots from one technology to another, it's happened a couple times, just in the short time that I've been here, right? I am expected to pivot with the company versus anyone, you know, that if I was to specialize on a particular technology, yes, I could go really deep into something and really know it. But if the company shifts focus off of that product or off of that architecture, then I've got to kind of start over. And it's being in a role as a generalist. My management does allow me to dive deeper into things. And as I mentioned before, we've got people that are on our team, even though they're generalists, they do kind of minor in a particular technology. So like I do security, Bryan does data center, Sal does collab. And that's extremely helpful because we can just use our own team as resources. We don't have to go out and branch out as much to the other teams that are specialists, but are also covering, you know, 2 or 3 regions, right? So, you know, that's where we're able to kind of keep it in house and, you know, have a little bit more control over all those variables.
How do you choose what to minor in?
I don't really know how I got mine. It just worked out because I definitely had a knack for it, and it was something that I was interested in. But when I started, we were 1-to-1 mapped account manager wise, and my manager was like, "Okay, you've got 3 guys. We have 2 now. We have 3 guys down here in what we call the southern tier of our region. This guy was going to do data center. He was going to be really good at it, because he was already doing it. This guy has a history in collab, so he's been doing collab, and he's going to cover collab and specialize in that. We don't have anyone down here that does security, so you're going to do that." Okay. So I was the last one in, and I got the topic that I enjoyed, so it worked out for me anyway. And then we were all going to cover what we call enterprise networking, so your Catalyst switching, your ISR router, stuff like that. We would all cover that, and it's just worked out. We've maintained that, and it's been extremely helpful.
If you don't let me ask you a question there, Bryan, what's your background? Do you come from a very technical background? Is that something that you're already kind of doing on your own time before maybe joining on as an SE generalist at Cisco?
I actually have been, I say I'm very blessed with the previous opportunities that I had before joining Cisco. So I went to 4-year college for network engineering, graduated with that degree there. And got into the workforce. Started off as a help desk analyst, then was at that company for I think about 2 years. Moved on to a manufacturing company where I was a network analyst, and then after 3 years there, I found a role as a network administrator within a K-12 school district. So if you notice, the industry's kind of hopped around a little bit, which was really, really beneficial for me because being in manufacturing versus a corporate setting versus a K-12 school district, very, very different, right? There's very different dynamics, different needs, and it allowed me to be more versatile. So now when I go into this role, yes, I support commercial, but I support different industries within commercial. So I do have manufacturing customers. I have healthcare customers. I have software as a service customers, right? So I've been extremely blessed to be able to have the opportunities that I've had. But coming from K-12 was definitely an interesting jump, moving into the sales role and going from the customer side to the vendor side, the sales side of the house. It's definitely a big shift. And I remember about the first day I started, I was like, what the hell did I just do? But then I remembered that the first day I started as a network admin, I thought the exact same thing, because I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I'm going to bring this network down. This isn't good. So, you get that day of like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? But you kind of get over it as you're like, okay, let me just take it one day at a time, one day at a time.
Would you say that maybe that diverse, I don't know, repertoire of experience that you kind of built up over the years, has that helped you as a generalist, just in general? Like, are there a lot of transferable skills and maybe in that regard of having seen so many different industries and maybe their own requirements to how you're able to talk to so many different types of customers on the entire Cisco say network security suite?
I definitely think so. I think you hit the nail on the head. Being in those different industries, it allows me to see different perspectives. So when a customer comes to me in an industry that I haven't been in and says, oh, well, we're experiencing this. So I had a customer that I've had a few that when the NIST requirements are coming out, that I need to be NIST compliant. So I'm like, okay, well, I don't know about NIST. I don't know specifically about that yet. I will look into that. But I do understand what it means to be compliant to something. I do understand that, how it works. So I can relate to the customer, understand where they're coming from, and then that puts me in a better position to serve them. I think, as I said, I think I'm very blessed to have those different opportunities throughout my career that have really kind of shown me the different ways that IT, integrates into a company, different cultures in terms of some cultures that, don't like spending money in IT and look at IT as just a business, a money loss, right? It's just a drain of money. We just throw money in and we get nothing out of it. And then other companies that realize the value and understand the necessity of, digitally transforming, right? And I have these customers today, right, where they're telling me, they're like, yeah, we just got no budget. Our budget just got cut again this year. I don't know what to do, and I've got all these things to worry about. It helps me relate to them. And that's one of the best parts about my job, and that's why I love it so much, is I really get to relate with my customers and work with them and become that trusted advisor, so that they feel comfortable coming to me with any question, even if it's outside of Cisco. Be like, hey, do you have any experience with X, Y, and Z? What do you think about it? And I can give them an honest answer, and they'll appreciate that.
So how do you get those who are like, they know or they don't understand really the value, to see the value of using some of your product and actually in the end buying from you to enhance their IT security?
Yeah, so that comes up a lot, as you can probably imagine, and it's funny because I was just talking to a friend of mine. I have to get some trees cut down in my backyard, and I've got 4 different quotes that are broad. I got 2,500 all the way up to almost 6,000. And the guy that's that we're in the higher end, they're telling me, oh well, we're higher. We're higher than most people. It's because we have workman's comp and insurance and this and that, and they're explaining to me why the cost justification is there. And I told him, I said, listen, man, I work for Cisco. I totally get it. Like I go into the room usually not being the cheapest one there, right? And it's really about explaining the key differentiators, right? If you get into a tit for tat battle with pricing, you're either going to undersell your value to the point where you've just devalued your platform entirely to that customer, or you're going to lose, and then there's going to be begrudging either way, right? It's really about selling the value, talking about the key things that make us a differentiator, because again, we don't go into that room usually the lowest price solution out there, and that's going to be sometimes a struggle. But I look at it as a challenge. I had, if if I go off on a tangent, I apologize. But I had a great I had a great customer who the first time I sat with them, they flat out told me, they said, all right, we want to talk about your firewalls, but I'll tell you right now, the only reason you're here right now is because my boss told me to talk to Cisco. I have not used your firewalls since PIX, and it was crap, and Cisco sucks. He basically said F Cisco right to my face.
Yeah.
So it was just myself and the account manager. And of course, this is a situation that I haven't really been in many times. But I said, all right, I have nothing to lose here. So I'm going to have some fun. I'm going, I'm just going to be myself and see what happens. So in that hour meeting, I won't tell you what happened in the meeting, but at the end of the meeting, we were best friends.
Yep.
To the point where I sent him a Christmas gift, which was a tongue-in-cheek joke where I sent him a little 5-port Netgear switch as a Christmas gift. And the end all of the story was he ended up buying the Cisco firewalls. I could sit there and show him, here's our Gartner reports, and here's a 400-slide presentation on why we're better than X, Y, and Z. And here we'll throw in a bunch of learning credits, and we'll discount the crap out of this. But no, I connected to him on a human level, to the point now where, fast forward 2 years, he calls me out of the blue and he's like, hey, Brian, I haven't talked to you in a while. How you doing? Listen, I need to get some new switching for X, Y, and Z. I need some new Catalyst switching. Okay, what are you using it for? Data center stuff. You probably don't want Catalyst in there. Let's talk about Nexus. Oh, what's Nexus? I said, hey, listen, I already did this on an episode of my podcast. Go listen to it. It's like 20 minutes long. Then you can come back and ask me any questions. He wrote me the next day, said, I listened to the podcast, made total sense. I bought the Nexus. Done. But that you don't develop that relationship by showing Gartner reports and slide decks and even a demo, just going off of the demo script, right? You don't build that. Personal relationships are absolutely vital and key in this position.
I love this. Basically, a lot of people think that sales engineer's job is just to answer technical questions, do the demos, do a presentation. But a majority of what we do is actually showing value. And sometimes it's like, you might not have talked about the product in the meeting. You might have mentioned it, but you spent that hour building a relationship with the customer. And who hasn't been with a customer who just hates their product? Almost everybody, every SE I know. Like, I worked for 2 competitive companies right now. Like, I switched from Spirent to Ixia, and I've had customers who hated Spirent. I have customers who hate Ixia.
Yeah,
you're gonna face that, and instead of like talking, oh no, we're great, just build that relationship. People buy from people they like more than people they don't like, and that's half the battle.
And that to your point, you hit the nail on the head. When we were having that initial meeting, that initial 1-hour conversation, I had my laptop with me like I do everywhere, right? But I was sitting. There's basically 2 chairs in front of a desk. I had no projector. I carry around a second monitor, which is awesome, by the way. If you ever want to do a quick demo, like at a a Starbucks or whatever, you just pop this out and show them that. Those are great. But I didn't do that. I did not talk about the product. I didn't sit there and try to sword fight them with oh, this feature, that feature, and this thing and that thing. I connected with them on a human level. I said, oh yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, when I was the network admin at K12, we needed to run our stuff through 2 firewalls, and we only had the one internet connection, so we had to split it. So we ended up running everything through a little 5-port Netgear switch, and there's the joke. And I said, yeah, we had 3,000 users connected to the internet on a 1 gig pipeline on a little $80 switch, But he was able to connect with me because he realized what it was like to run an IT department on a shoestring budget, where IT is just looked at as a black marking, right? It's red all over, just spending money. That is what made him realize, hey, you know what? This guy's not just here to sell me Cisco. This guy is here to help me and enable me. And that's the thing. I want to be that trusted advisor. I want to be that enabler for them to help them do their job better, so that they're not, so that they look good to their boss, right?
Yeah. So how did you learn that? Like, not many SEs know this. You're either a natural or you learned it somehow. Which one is it?
I guess I'd have to say natural. You know what it is? It came back to, I came from the customer side. So I had salespeople in my office. One of my favorite, I'll give a shout out to him. He's not at Extreme Networks anymore. He's over at HP now. But I had a great guy there, Rob, that helped me out and was just an awesome asset for me. So every time we were actually in the process of switching from HP to Extreme Networks at the time. And he was just an awesome resource that I could call anytime. He'd walk me through it. He'd sit down. Did he get back to me immediately right away? Not all the time, but he made an effort and he understood what I was going through. And when I got the tap on the shoulder from Cisco to be like, hey, do you want to be an SE? And I'm like, well, what's an SE? And I realized, wait a minute, that's what he does. Oh, wow. I could do that. That's really cool. I can go and bring my customers to lunch. That's another perk, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's nothing better than being able to go all these great places for lunch. But it made me realize, like, okay, that's the kind of person I want to be. I want to be the person that can that I would want to sell to me, right? So I guess it's kind of a mixture of natural and learned, because when you come from the customer side, I think there's definitely a huge benefit of doing that, because you've been on both sides of a sales call, right? Where it's either a good one or a bad one. I've seen it too. I can't stand demos where they can just stick to a script. That's all they can do. And when a customer asks a question about, oh, I saw this thing over here. Well, how do you integrate with this product? And what do you think about that? And their head just explodes. There's just some people that, don't have it, don't know what to do. They don't feel comfortable walking outside that line. Me, I'm always walking on the edge of that line. I like to push the envelope a little bit. It's fun, and I guess that's where the natural part of it comes in, right? You just have to be comfortable enough with yourself and your own skills so that you can be more of a valuable asset.
So you learned a lot from example too, like seeing how people do it right or do it wrong. You must have interacted with some bad SEs out there as well.
I've seen it. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. It is. Benny, did you have any questions now that you've parked and you have time to think?
This has been excellent, actually, to be honest with you. It's just really cool to be able to hear it from somebody that's a lot very technical in many respects, the importance of the human side and the people side, and to kind of hear your journey and some of the stories and not even challenges that you face, but I guess
Sorry.
I lost him too. I didn't hear him.
Yeah, we kind of lost you, Benny. Let's blame the internet.
Solar flares.
Yeah. That's why solar flares. All right. Well, while Benny's figuring out his Wi-Fi, I guess it is time to switch to the not so fire round. We lost Benny altogether. All right. That not so fire round. So these are 4 questions I ask most of my guests.
Okay.
And we can take our time answering them, or if you choose to do it in fire round succession, we can do that as well.
I'll try. I know I ramble, so I'll try to keep it short.
No way. Benny, are you still on here? You're on here.
I'm on back. Here. Yeah. The audio's kind of good enough, but yeah, I'm back.
All right. So I'm going to ask the first question. What is the one thing you love about being a sales engineer?
My relationships with my customers, hands down.
I was promised some rambling.
No, it's and that's really it. I love being that trusted advisor role. I know I've mentioned that word like 4 times already, right? I love being that trusted advisor to them. I love it when I have a customer that can reach out to me and be like, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And the podcast is another way that I've been able to reach out to them and maintain that relationship with them in a unidirectional fashion, right? I'm only just broadcasting out, but they get to hear my voice. They trust me already. They listen, and maybe I perk up something in the back of their mind that they'll think about later and reach up like, hey, listen, I checked this episode a while ago. The topic came up here. It reminded me of you. Do you want to come in and tell me about it? What's changed since then? That's what I strive for. So absolutely, the relationships with my customers is the best part of my job.
Unrelated to the not so fire round, what is your podcast about?
Awesome. So the podcast is called Conf T with your SE, and it's basically the way it started was just my way of communicating with my customers in that unidirectional fashion, like I mentioned, right? Unidirectional. The idea here is we cover a topic every 2 weeks is something different. We've covered Cisco TAC, we've covered Cisco Talos, which is our security intelligence research arm. Different security products or Wi-Fi, SD-WAN, you name it, right? And the idea is we'll go just deep enough for you to understand the product and get a little taste of it. It's an audio only podcast, so we don't have those visual cues and whiteboards and stuff like that to go off of. So we can't go too deep, but it's just a way to keep people updated in that, semi-regular, or actually every 2 weeks. So it's pretty regular fashion, right? Just to keep them up aboard of what's going on and talk about the topics that are top of mind for us as a sales team.
Right. So if anyone wants to learn anything about Cisco, they have your podcast to turn to for that.
Yeah, we definitely we've dove into kind of the back end stuff too. So I actually have an episode coming out this week where I have a conversation with Nigel. He's one of the people that works at at Talos, as I mentioned, our security research intelligence. I've also had conversations with the people out of our CX department, which is our customer relations, customer experience piece. But then we also talk about the technology too. So every 2 weeks, it's something different. Sometimes we go on a technology, or a particular product. Sometimes we go on kind of a mindset like zero trust, right? It's not a product. It's a bunch of products. It's a suite of products, but it's also a mindset. And we talk about, why you want to do that and how you can start doing that and get started there. So yeah, I mean, it's really all about Cisco from the people, as I put in my little description, the world of Cisco brought to you by the people that know it best, right? We're in there day in and day out, and there's never, ever, at least not yet, been a lack of topics to talk about with Cisco.
Okay. So I will link that in the podcast. Go ahead,
I
Bini.
appreciate that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I love how the audience of that podcast can be both those internally at Cisco, as well as those externally, not only those that are just interested in as a company, not only those that are interested in maybe even working there, but even customers. That example you said of having that guy that just listened to your podcast and ended up buying Nexus essentially the next day is super cool. So I think it's a really cool niche market you got there, or just a cool market that you're addressing there with that show.
It was definitely unexpected. I came up with the idea, and originally it was supposed to be for our customers. And I have partners reach out to me that find it as a great learning tool. I've mentioned before, I've got internal Cisco people that are either account managers or SEs that maybe that aren't generalists, that are like, hey, I didn't know about that. That was awesome to me. I had a sales engineer within the enterprise department talked to me the other day and was like, hey man, I listened to your episode on SD-WAN and whoa, that was awesome. And I'm like, how do you not know about this stuff? Are your enterprise, like, you're supposed to know like everything. He goes, no, we don't cover it in what I do. So I didn't know about it. And it was easy to understand and I was able to grasp it. The best thing I've ever got is I got an email from an SE that was about 6 months into his role out of the UK. And he reached out and said, yeah, I'm about 6 months in. And I was told to check out your podcast to kind of get up to speed on things. And I did. And I thought it was really helpful. And I wanted to reach out and say thanks. And I was like, who told you to reach out, like to listen to it over in the UK? He goes, oh, you have quite a fan base over here. I have never been to the UK. I don't market in the UK. And sure enough, I look at my statistics, and UK and Australia are always fighting for number 2. And I'm like, I don't know how this happened. And it's just been word of mouth, and it spreads around. But it's as you said, it's been a tool for my customers, for partners, for internal Cisco. And it was never planned to be that way, but it really worked out that way.
So would you recommend other SEs do podcasts for their own companies as well?
Hey, if you got the topics, you got the chops to do it, by all means. I mean, I think I actually just found out yesterday that my brother's doing a podcast. He's 10 years younger than me, and he's doing kind of like a commentary talk radio kind of thing. And I listened to it for the first time. I was like, dude, he's been doing it for like 9 months now. I'm like, I had no idea. He's always trying to follow me and do what I do. I bust his chops all the time.
We'll make sure to tell him that. Yeah, so you don't even need the chops to do it, honestly. In terms of, like, when I first started doing this podcast, I didn't know if I had the chops, but I got other people who have been doing it for a long time.
Yeah.
And that kind of proved to me that I do have the chops as we went through. But initially, I got experts to come and talk.
Well, that's the thing. You said you didn't have the chops. You did. You just didn't realize it. And
I didn't know.
You didn't know. And that's the thing. You really have to push yourself as a person, right? There's some Tony Robbins kind of advice, right? Just push yourself to better yourself every day, right? And it may mean going outside your comfort zone. You may find out, hey, you know what? I'm pretty good at it.
Yeah.
I think I do the podcast all right. We have fun with it. You're obviously successful in what you're doing with this podcast, and it all starts off as an idea and maybe a little bit of risk.
Yeah.
And every great successful company, I mean, Apple, Cisco, Microsoft was started in the same fashion, right? An idea and taking a little bit of risk and just taking that step and, okay, taking the next one and the next one. And there you go.
Awesome. Benny, can you see the questions if you want to take the next one?
I actually can't at all right now. Sorry.
No worries. I'll do all the work today.
Thanks.
Betty will just edit everything together.
I told you the first one was going to be a ramble.
Well, I kind of encourage that. So what is one thing you would change about your job? For everybody listening, we're still here. Brian's just thinking. Brian, did I lose you? No, we got you back.
Okay. Sorry. Well, that was even a better pause, more dramatic pause.
Yeah.
I would say, knowing where everything is, right? There has to be a better way to organize where all the resources are that you can go to. There are, as I mentioned, a ton of resources within Cisco. So many that it's extremely hard to find them all. And they're always trying to make things different. They're always trying to push this new tool for this piece and that new tool. And, we're going to put our stuff over here and then we're going to move it over there. And, it's not to say they're not trying, because they are, but it's so much. There's like, okay, where do I go if I want to figure out how to kick off an RMA for something that's not covered by SmartNet, right? Yeah. That's something that comes up pretty regularly. Knowing where those tools are, and that's where it takes you a while to get kind of, especially at Cisco, it takes about a year before you really feel like you're, being useful. But that'd be the one thing I would change is a better organization of where the things are that you need to do your job, which can go many different directions.
Awesome. All right. Question number 3. Don't worry, Benny. I got it. Is there a book or resource that you think every sales engineer should be exposed to?
Obviously, the Conf T with your SE podcast, absolutely, obviously. And this one, absolutely.
Thank you.
No, and I do mean that. I was listening to your episodes, and I thought they were extremely helpful. And I think I'm definitely going to be making my recommendation for you guys on my show as well, because
thank you.
I think that you guys have a lot of great things to say. You even got me thinking of stopping myself before I say that was a great question.
I'm happy about that. All right, awesome. Is there anything else any other resources that you think of, or
not one that I can think of off the top of my head? I mean, there's always a ton of resources out there. Find one that kind of makes sense for you. Talk to people that are in your field as well and see what's worked for them. I find that, and I think you kind of saw this already, was just looking at my surroundings and asking questions and kind of mimicking what I'm seeing done around me is kind of an easy way to kind of get up to speed with my surroundings. So I would say reach out to the peers in your organization or in your line of work.
All right. So last question of the not so fire round is, what separates great SEs from the okay or the not so good ones?
The ability to be agile. And as I gave you that example already, if you're doing a demo and you're going off of a script and you can't go off that script, and if that customer asks a question and he tries to veer you off because he wants to go down a rabbit hole, I understand you don't know the answer to stuff. I've said many times in the beginning and still today, I'm sorry, Mr. Customer, I don't know that. I have to get back to you. That's okay. But you need to have the ability to be agile with that customer, because if you go in there saying, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to present these 15 slides, then we're going to do 5 minutes for Q. You can't have that regimen. You just can't. You have to be adaptive to your customer and your conversation, and really go with the flow.
Yeah.
To that point is, oh, sorry, I was going to say to that point as well, something that that I kind of learned over time as well, that obviously the importance of being agile is very important, but you do want to sometimes be careful too of taking the time to really think about what you're about to say, or think about the question that's being asked before proposing a new solution. Because sometimes we're just thinking like, okay, let's think of let's present the next, potential alternative. If you run into an initial roadblock, it might not be the best possible one because you're so agile. So there's so many things flowing through your head. I've definitely run into the situation where while being agile is extremely important, but also take your time and make sure that you're presenting the best solution while still being agile.
Yeah, listen to your customer for sure. And I think if you do that, you can, and you stop and think, as you said, you can be a better engineer for sure. And a better salesman too. I mean, that goes with the account managers too.
Yep. And don't solution on the first date based on what you were saying, Benny.
Yep.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
All right. So last question for the show. Where can people find out more about you?
So I am on LinkedIn. I'll give you the link for that, but I think it's just LinkedIn/BRYYOUNG. And then of course my podcast. Those are really the two sources of me publicly that are out there. And again, the podcast is Conf T with your SE, CONF space T, shorthand for configure terminal for anyone that's done the CLI stuff. But yeah, we're available on the Spotify and the Apple Podcasts and all around. So check it out wherever you get your podcasts, and you can hear this sexy voice every 2 weeks if you want.
Is that a selling feature?
A lot of people.
That's a self-deprecating, falling on the sword, tongue in cheek, right?
Well, this is awesome. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Our pleasure.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you.
All right, man. So, all right, we just listened to with Bryan what he had to say. Do you agree with anything that he said?
Oh, tough question. No, I'm kidding.
Not a good question?
Yes, very much so. No, yeah, I think it was actually excellent. What an interesting guest. He came from an extremely technical background, but it was extremely personable, really understood the sales side of things, came from a different structured organization that I'm familiar with. So it was really cool to hear that. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting to hear his insight. How about you?
Yeah, like it's interesting that I just hit the microphone. Yeah, he came from a customer side and he moved into the sales engineering role. And if you recall, Chris White from last week's podcast, he talked about like half of our job is sales. And the way Bryan talked about the way he works with his customers, he does sales just as much as he does the technical stuff. As a matter of fact, he doesn't do a lot of the post-sales work. It's mostly pre-sales. So yeah, that was very interesting to me. And what's interesting is big companies like Cisco, they actually pivot about what they want to focus on in terms of this technology is what's going to get us the most money right now. So we're going to push that most of the customers. And he has to learn that. My companies, I haven't had that, right? It's always been my bread and butter has always been my bread and butter. That's what I'm focusing on. So that part was interesting to me.
I agree, especially as an SE generalist, which is kind of what he was doing. So I think as he described it, going inch deep, mile wide, it's really, it's extremely important and probably very challenging to have to, really get to be able to pivot and know something extremely technical all of a sudden. I mean, like in my role, the newest things that come up are kind of based off the same infrastructure, but more so have to relate to new changes in the regulatory environment. So learning those new regulations and how we address that is obviously a little bit of a challenge, but it's always in the same realm of regulations in the most part. For Bryan, he might be dealing with a whole new technological stack. He might be dealing with a whole new, mandate that Cisco may have, which could require that pivot to be much more challenging. So yeah, that was interesting.
I do want to point out that he did say it's an inch deep and a mile wide, but he is also an expert, or I don't know how much of an expert he is, but he does focus on security. So, and that's kind of what generalist SEs do. Whatever their customers need, or depending on their team. So my customers need, I'm going to just say it, like some technical words. If you don't get it, that's fine. They need L2, L3 testing. We do L2, L3 security. We do layer 4, layer 7. We do LTE. We do wireless. That's part of my company's portfolio. But my customers focus on just one of them, L2, L3. So that is my focus.
Okay.
And I know an inch deep in other ones, and nothing in like the ones that I haven't had to sell any to our customers. So again, company to company, things change. But yeah, like it was interesting to see from a big company, a company like Cisco, how SEs work.
Agreed. Yeah, very much so. It's also really cool too to see how somebody created content. So Bryan, with his podcast, was able to create content to first to support his customers, But then to have found such a wide audience too, with people who's interested in Cisco products, who might be interested in working, with him, or sorry, with Cisco in the future. But I think that the one that definitely stood out for me was that story he told about somebody, just listening to the podcast and then ended up buying that product or Nexus shortly thereafter.
Yeah.
I think it was really cool to see that.
So something we don't see from SEs, it's focused on marketing, but social selling. I think it should be a topic at some point in the podcast. Like SEs know exactly what customers want. With all respect to marketing folks, they don't generally know exactly what customers want. They don't work with customers on a day-to-day basis. They get their information from product managers, SEs, whatever. So our SEs are in a position to actually do a lot of these videos, podcasts. Like he's doing a podcast, right?
Yeah, no, it's true.
All about technical stuff. It's not
right
for Cisco. So
I agree. And to your point, maybe like on the flip side of that, like to marketing people's credit, I mean, a lot of sales engineers, I mean, myself included, we weren't necessarily the best at the whole social media game or social selling. I mean, I'm getting just convinced now to maybe get an Instagram, but I don't know anything about that. And so I think it's really cool for someone to get out of their, maybe not out of their comfort zone, but maybe start to combine something that's more technical with something that is more social. And it's kind of cool how marrying those two worlds. I mean, similar to what sales engineering is as a whole, the marrying of these two different technical and more salesy roles can clearly provide a lot of benefits. So I think, kudos to him and really to you as well for starting this show as well. So
well, it's different. When I'm not using the show to sell any of my company's products. Like I'm using the show to learn more about sales engineering. But if for those who are listening, if you want a good example about social selling, check out Mark Green on LinkedIn. I'm actually going to add him to the show notes, which is show 96, thesaleengineers.com/show 96. He's been on the podcast before. And now he has I think he's done, 6 or 7 2-minute Tuesdays where he talks about his products for 2 minutes or 3 minutes. He says 2 minutes, but it's never been 2 minutes. I know Mark. I think it's hard for him to stay within 2 minutes. But yeah, that's another example of social selling. So yeah.
Oh, it definitely sounds like a good topic. But yeah, definitely enjoyed the show. I hope everybody else did here today as well. Look forward to or take a look at the show notes for a summary of today's conversation, a link to Bryan's LinkedIn, his podcast, to Mark Green's book. Nope, not a book. Edit that out.
His LinkedIn.
His LinkedIn as well. Anything else?
Yeah, I do have a request from folks. We don't have that many iTunes reviews. I'm getting a lot of great feedback. I'm getting personal messages. You're getting personal messages now from people you've never met.
Yeah, I love it.
If you can take the time to put a review on iTunes or Google Play, wherever it is that you listen to the podcast, it will help the podcast. It will let people know that this is a legit podcast where we actually provide good information. I don't want to prolong this any more than it is. Like, we're not making money out of this podcast. So if you want to support us, that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to buy stuff off of Amazon using our links. I'll leave it at that. How about that? All right, man. It's time to end the show. Thank you, Bini, for being here. Thank you, Bryan, for coming on, spending your time with us. With that, this is Ramsey. You got Bini, and we are signing off.